Spring arrived the way forgiveness sometimes does. Quietly, without asking permission, touching what it could and leaving the rest to thaw at its own pace. Green grass pressed up through the last pale seams of snow, and the river loosened its voice beneath an old wooden bridge, whose planks remembered more footsteps than it could name. Light flickered on water like a held breath. If you listened closely, the land seemed to be deciding whether to hope again, and the decision had not yet been made. Rohi Grey Willow, aged 20, stood alone at the center of the bridge, her shadow braided with the railings, her long dark hair moving with the spring wind, as if the season itself had found her first. She was known as the most beautiful woman of her people, though beauty had long ago stopped feeling like a gift to her and begun to feel like a charge. Her eyes held pain without apology and strength without spectacle, the kind of strength that keeps standing even when it has nowhere to go, and she watched the river as if it might explain what everyone else refused to say. Her own tribe had turned from her with the careful distance people reserve for shame. Once, when the chief's son struck their sacred horse in a fit of cruel authority, Rohi lifted a gun and fired into the air to make him stop. The sound cracked the sky and split the moment in two, and though no one was hurt, a line had been crossed that could not be redrawn. In their tradition, a woman raising a weapon was a dishonor that stained everyone nearby, and the stain had settled on her name, and the stain had not lifted. The town had its reasons too, thin and loud and repeated often enough to feel true. Rohi spoke fluent English. Rohi could read map. Rohi knew how rivers cut land, and how roads were planned, and how words could move borders without anyone lifting a blade. She is a spy, they whispered, their voices sharp with fear disguised as certainty. She steals land with knowledge. It did not matter that she had learned to survive, that intelligence was the only inheritance left to her. The crime had already been decided, and guilt was simply the shape it took. Hooves sounded on the planks behind her, a measured rhythm that belonged to someone unafraid of being seen. Rohi did not turn at first. She had learned the cost of anticipation. The horse stopped close enough that she could feel the animal's warmth through the cool air, and still she waited, curious despite herself, because curiosity was the one thing exile had not managed to take from her. Caleb Hartman, age 30, sat his horse with the ease of a man who had learned balance the hard way. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his coat worn at the seams, his eyes tired with the kind of wear that comes from witnessing injustice and choosing not to make peace with it. He had lost things without making a ceremony of the loss, and yet something in him still believed that doing right was a form of shelter, even if it let the weather in. He dismounted and stood in front of her, not blocking the bridge, not claiming ground, simply present. For a moment the river spoke for both of them, and the town held its breath. Then he met her gaze, steady as a promise he intended to keep. "I will give you my name in front of all. Come with me," he said, his voice firm and threaded with an emotion that did not ask to be admired. Rohi's breath caught, not because she had never been offered safety, but because she had never been offered it publicly. Her voice trembled, though her spine did not. "If you stand beside me," she said quietly, "they will turn against you." Caleb did not hesitate. "Then let them," he replied, as if the answer had been waiting for him all along. "I'd rather face the world than leave you standing alone." Something shifted in her chest, a door she had stopped knocking on years ago. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt seen without being measured, and she stepped toward him as the river carried the moment downstream, and the town began to watch. The cabin stood where the meadow opened itself to the sky, wood and patience and a fence that needed mending. Spring had reached even here, and the fields were dotted with early flowers that did not yet know their names. Caleb led Rohi inside without ceremony, as if belonging were an ordinary thing, and the door closed on a hush that felt like the beginning of a sentence. It did not take long for the sheriff and the townspeople to arrive, anger dressed up as concern. Sheriff Edgar Boone stood at the front, his hat pulled low, his authority heavy with habit. "Send the native woman away," he ordered, as if words could still move people the way they used to. Caleb stepped forward, his voice steady enough to carry. She stays. This is my home, and she is under my protection. Rohi stood behind him, not hiding, not pleading, her hands folded, her eyes level. Silence gathered like a storm considering itself, and the sheriff's jaw tightened as if the land itself had contradicted him. The early days inside the cabin were quiet, not the awkward quiet of strangers but the careful quiet of people learning the shape of each other's presence. Rohi cooked with practiced hands, her movements efficient and gentle, the smell of food filling the room like a memory returning. Caleb repaired fences and replaced broken boards, his hammer keeping time with thoughts he did not yet have words for. They spoke when they needed to and listened when they did not, and something began to soften around the edges. One evening, spring rain fell softly, tapping the roof with patient fingers. They sat near the fire, the light painting their faces in gold and shadow. Rohi watched the flames as if they might speak. "All my life," she said at last, her voice low, "people feared what I knew." Caleb looked at her with a gentleness that surprised them both. "Then let me be the one who respects it." Days unfolded into gestures. He taught her to ride freely across the green fields, not gripping the reins like a defense but letting the horse find its rhythm. She laughed, the sound startled and bright. "I never rode like this before, without fear." "That's how life should be," he said, smiling, and the words stayed with her longer than the ride. She helped him read maps and find safer trails, her fingers tracing rivers as if they were old friends. Their hands brushed, and neither pulled away, and the moment lingered like a question not yet ready to be asked. News traveled faster than healing. Tomas Red Elk, the chief's son, heard of Rohi living with the cowboy, and the truth burned inside him with a heat that had nothing to do with love. He had always desired her, not for who she was but for what obedience would say about him, and when she had told him, "You demand obedience, not love," something in him had cracked. Pride, once wounded, looks for allies, and Tomas found his in anger. He wrote to Sheriff Boone under the guise of peace, claiming Rohi was dangerous, suggesting cooperation. Ink dried on the page, sealing a bargain that did not know it was a betrayal yet. The night came quietly, as nights do when they mean harm. Armed men surrounded the cabin, and gunshots shattered the spring air, breaking the spell of rain and fire. Caleb fought with the desperation of a man defending more than walls, knocking men down until a blow from behind sent him into darkness. On the sheriff's orders, he was knocked unconscious, not killed, Mercy wearing a uniform. Rohi screamed as they dragged her away, the sound tearing through the trees. "Don't leave him," she cried. "Take me, but don't hurt him." The forest swallowed her voice, and the cabin fell silent as if it had never known laughter. Dawn found Caleb on the floor, pain blooming in his skull, the cabin broken, Rohi gone. He fell to his knees and whispered her name, the word a prayer and a promise. Then he mounted his horse and rode. For 7 days he searched, through forests blooming with spring flowers that seemed almost cruel in their beauty, across rivers swollen with melting snow that tested his resolve, over mountains beneath bright skies that offered no answers. Each night, he whispered to the dark, "Hold on. I'm coming," and the words carried him farther than his body wanted to go. On the 7th day, he found her camped deep in the forest, guarded and trapped. He used courage where strength failed and intelligence where speed would have betrayed him, distracting the guards, cutting her free with hands that shook only after it was done. Rohi gasped when she saw him, tears breaking loose. "I knew you'd come," she cried, and the truth of it steadied them both. They escaped into the wilderness together, the forest closing behind them like a secret kept. They hid in a deep cave where the air was cool and the light came in cautious slivers. Caleb's knee was badly injured, the pain sharp and persistent. Rohi cleaned the wound with trembling hands, her care precise, her breath unsteady. Suddenly, she broke, wrapping her arms around him as if letting go would undo everything. "I thought I'd never see you again." He cupped her face gently, his thumb tracing the line of her cheek. "You are my reason for breathing." He kissed her then, slow and careful, the kind of kiss that promises without demanding, and time slowed to make room for it. They chose not to return to town, not yet, the world too loud for what they were becoming. 3 days later, they learned that bandits had attacked Rohi's tribe. Pain crossed her face like a shadow passing over water. "They are still my people," she said softly, the words heavy with history. Caleb nodded, the decision already made. "Then we stand with them." Together, they returned, fighting not with rage but with resolve. The people watched Rohi risk her life for them, watched her stand where she had once been pushed aside. Shame filled their hearts, and something like recognition followed close behind. Tomas stepped forward, broken in a way pride could not mend. "My pride blinded me," he said. "Forgive me." The words fell into the space she had made by surviving. The tribe apologized to both of them and asked them to stay, the invitation a bridge being rebuilt. One spring night beneath blooming trees, Caleb took Rohi's hands, his voice shaking. "Be my wife," he said. "Walk beside me forever." Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "Always yes," and the forest seemed to lean in to listen. Their wedding was celebrated with drums and songs, both cultures honored as one, joy moving through the crowd like a shared breath drawn from many hearts at once. The rhythm of the drums pulsed like a living heartbeat beneath the open sky, and voices rose in harmony, some ancient and earthbound, others shaped by the frontier's rough tenderness, braiding together until no line remained between them. Firelight danced across smiling faces, glinting off beads, feathers, and worn leather, and for the first time in a long while, happiness was not cautious or borrowed, but whole. Later, by the river under a sky spilled with stars, the world softened into stillness. They sat close enough to share warmth, the cool night air carrying the scent of water and spring blossoms. The river murmured beside them, patient and eternal, as they spoke in quiet voices of dreams not yet lived and children not yet born, of small hands reaching for flowers, of laughter echoing through seasons they would face together. Each word felt like a seed placed gently into the future. Caleb turned to her then, his eyes tender in the starlight, and kissed her softly, as though time itself had slowed to honor the moment. When he spoke, his voice held reverence and certainty together. "My name is yours now." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of choice, devotion, and belonging freely given. They settled into her bones like a vow the earth itself had heard, and in that quiet, luminous space, love no longer felt like something fragile, it felt like home. Later, when Sheriff Boone fell gravely ill, his strength slipping away in the quiet way power always does when it can no longer command obedience, Rohi prepared medicine with the same patience and tenderness she had once been denied. At dawn she gathered herbs with reverent hands, each movement careful, each choice guided by knowledge shaped through loss rather than bitterness. When she placed the medicine into Caleb's palms, her voice was soft and unguarded. "Give this to him," she said. "Let him know it came from me." There was no anger in her eyes, only a grace born of love and hard-won peace. The sheriff recovered, slowly and humbly, and when he came to them, he did not come as a man of law but as a man laid bare. Tears traced lines down his face as he wept in shame, apologizing to them personally, his words trembling with regret. The town watched and learned that mercy does not always arrive loudly or proudly, that grace can come from the very hands it once pushed away, and that forgiveness, when freely given, has the power to soften even the hardest ground. They returned to their cabin then, the meadow both familiar and newly alive, as though it had changed simply by waiting for them. The fence stood straighter, the fields breathed green, and the sky seemed wider, kinder. A year later, spring came again, gentler this time, and with it a daughter whose laughter skipped along the river's edge, and whose small fingers learned the names of flowers before they ever learned fear. Seasons turned as seasons always do, but now they turned with tenderness, and their family stood rooted where once there had been only judgment, living proof that dignity, when given room to grow, will always find its way toward the light. And if you are listening now, standing on your own bridge between what has been and what might be, remember this. The world will tell you who to leave behind to stay safe. It will call courage dangerous and kindness naive. But there is a quiet power in choosing someone publicly, in offering your name when the cost is high. Love, when it is brave enough to be seen, does not just change two lives, it teaches the land how to bloom again.